I'm so excited to share you with everybody at Sidewalk Talk, finally, after I feel like you being sort of a mentor to me when I was really having a crisis of confidence in terms of how to be a leader with Sidewalk Talk. So, Jannis, I'm so excited to have you here. I'm in so much celebration about what you're doing and putting out there by creating this global consortium for solving loneliness, the Togetherness Hub. Welcome, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. I think right at the moment, you make me blush a bit because when you were talking about me being a mentor to you, it's flattering. And I mean, I try my best to kind of talk with the people just with what comes out of my mind. But so I think it was actually me being nervous when reaching out to you for the first time, representing this global phenomenon. Sidewalk Talk has grown into being represented all over the world. I was just having kind of this initial small idea how to have impact. And so I think it was definitely a reciprocal relationship of you giving plenty of good advice of how we can develop.
Well, I think the thing that we realized we had in common is that we both are people that believe that you can make changes in the world. And that was the one piece that seemed to, I feel like we started going, oh, and then this, and then I had to slow down and go, oh, wait, I'm like committing to something that I don't even have time to like see my kids and husband. But I think that that's something I really admire about you is that I don't meet a lot of people that have crazy ideas and go, oh, I can actually like implement that crazy idea. So can you tell everyone the crazy idea that you've like implemented? And since we met last week, I got to see how much has happened since we met first 8 months ago with the Togetherness Hub. Tell people what it is and what's happened with it and what's happening on Wednesday.
No, I mean, maybe first thing, isn't there this quote like those people crazy enough they can change the world will actually be the ones changing the world? So maybe this is exactly, we are both kind of crazy people on a mission.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, the crazy idea we had, it's actually born from the first lockdown surrounding COVID, when suddenly all the newspapers went crazy about people being isolated, being in lockdown, not being kind of able to see their relatives, being able to see their friends. And little me, who's kind of has a background in community building and event management, the entire event industry being dead, me trying to figure out what to do with my life, curiously diving into the subject matter of what does it actually mean for so many people being separated from each other. And to be honest, I don't have a background in researching loneliness. I don't have a background in really kind of diving deep into what does it mean to be socially isolated. But it was just this burning question, what does it mean for everyone who's not in a partnership, who might be in a toxic relationship? So, I mean, even people who are not surrounded by others might, of course, feel left alone, like they don't belong where they are, even though they have plenty of people around them. And so what we did was reaching out, me and my co-founder, Rahel Herceg, we reached out to experts from all over the world. We read kind of every newspaper article, every piece of research, trying to understand what is actually loneliness causing us as human beings to experience. And what was mind-boggling and shocking for me was to see all the research pointing in the direction of the health implications of loneliness, how severe they are, that chronic loneliness is equally impacting your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And we reached out to the professor who's responsible for this meta-analysis, Julian Holt-Lundstad, and asking her about it. And once again, we've been shocked and frustrated, not because of the great research she has done, but rather because she described the silos she is encountering day in, day out while conducting her research. So many researchers not talking to each other, so many great initiatives or health insurances she tried to collaborate on addressing chronic loneliness with, not being interested in collaborating. And so, well, we initially thought, okay, let's create a project focused on helping lonely individuals coping with their situation, we quickly realized that it might need something else to have even more impact, and create the first space where everyone focusing on social health and kind of improving the social health for others. Researchers, health insurances, social projects, government representatives, HR representatives from companies can come together to share their ideas, share their solutions, share their research on how to tackle loneliness in society most effectively and create communities which are kinder, which are more connected and are empathy driven. And so this is what we're about to launch now on Wednesday, this digital infrastructure for this collaboration, for this co-creation of solution to take place. And I'm incredibly excited because we already have now people attending from, I think, 15 different countries. And at one point, we definitely want to just have this as a starting point and include as many thought leaders, as many projects as possible from around the world in taking part in this conversation, and stop kind of reinventing the wheel, but rather say what might help lonely individuals in Canada might also kind of help lonely individuals in Germany or in France or in Australia. And so this is what we're trying to build.
You sound so excited.
I am.
You sound really excited. Tell us, I mean, I think that in addition to sort of getting the word out about Togetherness Hub, I think it'd be really interesting for folks that watch this live or watch this later. What has it been like for you personally to go from what you thought what it was going to be to what it's become to where you are now and what you've learned along the way?
I mean, I think it's not new to anyone who's currently living in those crazy COVID times that plans are going to be twisted and working out completely differently than you originally have expected them. So if you would have asked me 1 year ago if I would have imagined talking to government representatives and top researchers about kind of collaborating and creating something unique together, I mean, I was planning to join a startup in the event space. I had no idea. And so actually, like I think for many people, this journey is also to a certain extent a week by week approach. Of course, by now we have kind of a huge strategy and a vision, what we want to achieve with the Togetherness Hub. But it's still this unique nature of just committing to creation and building and being surrounded by other thought leaders who want to walk the walk instead of just talking the talk. And so this is kind of the bunch of people which pushes me forward, and I'm so incredibly thankful for day in, day out, because right at the moment I can talk, no matter where this project will at one point end up, every day I can have the privilege to talking to role models of mine who are trying to build more kinder communities, as I said earlier, who are trying to include people who are currently maybe excluded or suppressed from political and kind of civil participation. And I walk differently through the streets. I mean, of course, everyone with a mask walks differently through the streets, but suddenly I observe people who I have the sense they seem excluded. They kind of, the people avoid them. And I would say until a year ago, I might not have seen those individuals, for example, experiencing homelessness, might have kind of experienced a certain feeling of avoidance, that I could kind of try to keep my distance. Now I way more present in the moment, trying to absorb the moment and trying to come to different conclusions, how I potentially can help those lonely individuals. And it might lead to just a conversation. It might lead to something I can actually contribute to make that individual's life better. And so this is what I'm thankful for, that I can walk through life differently now.
So it sounds like it's really impacted you personally, not just in terms of your career, but you actually show up as a human differently.
I am.
Yeah.
No doubt whatsoever.
Yeah.
So if you, and of course, the feedback we are receiving. So it's one thing to create something being doubted by everyone. So I think when it comes to my direct kind of my family and so on, though they're supporting me, but with a certain maybe healthy skepticism. Is it a project he should drain his entire resources, his entire energy into? But when you then kind of talk to people previously having been strangers to you, but running huge projects which you admire, saying, thank you, this is exactly what we've been either looking for or with what we need, without maybe even realizing that it's what they need. So that they just describe, no, so far we don't have any international collaborations. We don't seek kind of inspiration from outside of our own nation. And you present them certain ideas which they might uncover or unravel kind of in another country. And they say, thank you. I wasn't aware that such a great idea out there exists which solves my problem here, for example, in the United States or in the European Union. And so breaking down those silos and building bridges, I think that's something plenty of projects truly attempt. And I think right at the moment we are also still in the stage of attempting it, but it's becoming more and more a reality day by day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to get a little personal with you because I think it's important people know who you are, because I don't think that every guy walking around the street says, hey, I want to like devote an incredible amount of life force and energy and time to solving this loneliness problem. Say a little bit about who you are and what do you suspect, aside from the circumstances of COVID and social isolation, what do you suspect in you sort of drew you towards this sort of new why for your life, Jannis?
I think most of my life I've been lost. Most of my life I tried to find a place where I kind of could belong, in the sense, and maybe this is also my personal connection to the topic of loneliness. So I've always kind of had the privilege of rather being surrounded by kind of quite a lot of people, but not necessarily always feeling kind of perfectly connected to those people around me and their interests and their values. And as someone who's really curious, so I mean, right at the moment, the project we are building, we work with research institutions, with world-renowned scientists who have a track record of sometimes 30 years of research. I quit 2 studies because I was drawn to kind of working impact oriented. And so the last study I've quit was political science. I found myself in this ivory tower where in a really fancy matter, everyone was an expert in understanding the problems we are facing in society. Beforehand, and also during my time studying political science, I was part of the European Youth Parliament. And there, people from all over Europe came together to try to come up with solutions around certain problems that the European Union was facing. It was a different way of dialogue. Suddenly it was not about, okay, we here in Germany, we have this problem, how can we fix it? But it was rather this huge amount of ideas, different perspectives, how kind of the same problem could be fixed. And suddenly within academia, I just kind of found people who were interested in creating the next research paper, but this pioneer kind of energy to take a problem, find a solution, and make the world a little bit, that the society is a better place, was lost. And to be honest, I felt lost as well, kind of already having quit my first study. Then I was kind of being in this new environment, saying, okay, I want to, of course, do my degrees, and then kind of start a regular job, probably, don't know, maybe in a corporate environment. I mean, I also kind of took a sneak peek in the corporate environment. I quit again early. So, I mean, most of my life, I also kind of doubted if I'm even capable of kind of bringing huge projects to life. And then at one point, I changed, kind of with a lot of self-reflection, my perspective on life, and realized who I am and which values I hold dear. And so kind of all those failures, or what others would might consider a failure, were for me learning experiences, really showing me what I want to do in life and who I want to serve in life. And fortunately, prior kind of to now the Togetherness Hub, I found my place completely without any previous experience in the event space, where I could create events, international events, where I could just bring people in, different ideas, different experts, different participants, to have conversations and gatherings around certain interest topics. And of course, we had all those different metrics to measure success, and if we kind of had enough revenue with tickets. But for me, my personal criteria to measure success, and I think it's also once again highly connected to what we're doing with the Togetherness Hub, if I walked around at one of my events and saw participants who were completely lost in a conversation, they were looking at each other and they completely lost track of their surroundings, completely lost track of time. And there was at least this hunch that maybe the event we had set up and the topics we kind of passed on might have been a contributor to this conversation to happen, for those people to meet for the first time and completely lose themselves in meeting each other. That was my personal way to measure success, to say, like, if I saw some of those people completely losing themselves while meeting new people, making connections, was the most rewarding experience. And I believe kind of this is still probably for me one of the most rewarding experiences, if I can connect people in a meaningful way. So this is also why we are not called the Loneliness Hub, but rather the Togetherness Hub.
So I really appreciate knowing this vulnerable piece about you. I mean, I think that anybody that's working on loneliness shares this piece that you started off with, which is some part of me felt like an outsider or didn't feel a sense of belonging. And I think that that's the challenge. And I really appreciated your willingness to be vulnerable there as the motivating force, because that vulnerability immediately allowed me to feel more connected to you, I think, than I've ever felt in our conversations. You know? Yeah.
And I mean, I already felt quite connected to you in the past. So if we are now even more connected, that's highly appreciated.
Yeah. I think that there's such a longing. Well, I think I'm going to just share, I mean, let's be frank, you're a man. And I think that sometimes men find it a little more difficult to acknowledge and say out loud, I might be feeling like an outsider, or I might not feel like I belong. And so I think that you probably created some space for other men who are listening to feel a little safer at just acknowledging that, so that hopefully they can go out and get those nutritive connections that would really fill their life and make them feel good. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Maybe to underline this statement, and to maybe share a little bit more of this kind of vulnerable part of myself. Self-doubt, anxiety, fear of the future. So those were things which for a long period of my time, so I mean, you can't finish high school until then, maybe everything was kind of still smooth and easygoing. someone else told you who you were supposed to be and kind of what to learn, what to study, and suddenly you're kind of being thrown out into the world with kind of huge amount of possibilities, and kind of you being asked, okay, now decide who you want to be and what you want to do in life and who you want to work with and impact and so on. I was completely overwhelmed, completely lost. And there were so many people who kind of seemed to, I remember I once kind of wrote an article where I kind of described it. Everyone seemed to have figured out this game called life so much more than I did. And so I believe sometimes those most vulnerable, those most hurtful pieces in our life are actually, if you think back, of course, you don't want them. You want to push them away, but reflecting on them, they're the most vulnerable, valuable pieces of my own journey. Because those are the times when I really couldn't avoid myself any longer. And I took a deep dive into who am I? Who do I want to be? Why do I want to be this person? What makes me happy? What makes me afraid? And all those answers, I mean, it's just, you can repeat this exercise again and again, and you never get the same answers. So it's not like that you are this one entity. It's not that you're kind of this one hope, this one dream, but usually the people are drawn between different life paths and different decisions. And especially now with social media, like it's being amplified. There, even you being confronted with even more paths you could have chosen from, or you still can choose from. And so I think what many people are being confronted with is this, on one hand, this sense of obligation that they need or already need to have figured out who they want to be and who they want to become in life, without any flexibility. It's being kind of put on the forefront by putting kind of a job description on us as a identifying factor, like saying, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm an environmental activist. But I mean, those things can change over time. And even though for a certain amount of time, they might give us a huge factor to identify with and say, this is where I invest quite a lot of my time. If you're drawn between professions, if you're drawn between ideas, and you try to juggle them and you fail to juggle, I'm not a good juggler. I mean, there's sometimes things break, and sometimes you fall down, and I know that all those motivating speakers say, just get up again. And every time you get up, yeah, but sometimes you're laying on the ground for a really long time. And that's okay. I mean, I had some of the most amazing speakers on my event stages who have been laying kind of on the ground for, let's say, 50, 60 years. And the power of the story and the power of the message they had to share was originating from them kind of for most of their life understanding themselves as failure and overcoming this state of mind, and saying, okay, for 30 years I've been supporting a right-winged fascist party beating up minorities, and I changed, and I realized that what I've done for the last 30 years has been wrong. And this is courage, but this courage would never surface without someone kind of admitting to himself, I've done something for 30 years, which I don't believe to be true anymore, and reinventing him or herself. And so, there's so much vulnerability and kind of this idea of, I need to know who I am, and I need to kind of be able to answer the question, who are you, perfectly well. I think most people in our today's society struggle with the question, who are you? Because they are drawn between different identities and different ideas of who they would like to be.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to try to summarize some pieces and bring in pieces that came up for me as I was listening to you. You know, when I first of all, as you were talking about your vulnerability around having self-doubt and all the different inputs that were pressing on you to define narrowly who you were, yet you were like, my definition is so much broader than this narrow definition that I keep feeling pressed in upon me. Um, what I heard you say, both for yourself and the speakers that you brought on stage, that the vulnerability was like uh, the hero's journey, so to speak, right? That you had to go through the dark night of the soul to really come out the other side. Not that vulnerability is always a dark night of the soul, but I think that, part of what makes us lonely is that we don't have a place to be in dialogue with other humans about our complexity. And we don't have a place to share those aspects of ourselves, which in fact makes us not lonely to ourselves, right? And so I hear you saying somewhere along the way, I had the capacity to hold my complexity and honor my complexity. And that allowed me to really land in knowing who I am, or having a better sense anyway. I think I'm 50 and I still don't know who I am. I'm a big believer that our self is not unitary. It's multiple. And but there's something. Is there a question that I'm asking you? I'm just feeling caught up in what you've said, and what's happening is I'm feeling deeply the longing for every human to have a place to share their complexity in a safe way where we can really know each other. And you allowed me to do that a little bit just in how you shared a bit about yourself and your own journey. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, to tiny thought piece in that regards. But I think I figured out for myself. Sometimes you don't have the words. So I mean, it's one thing to be self-reflected and trying to understand who you are, but sometimes there are just pieces missing. They're just experiences you're still about to make, which might give you words to underline certain values which you already kind of had somehow connected to your identity, which you hold dear, but not being capable of phrasing it. I mean, right at the moment, we're speaking English. I mean, my native language is German. And so by nature, some things come maybe across differently than I would have phrased them in other language. Also forming an identity when you kind of, for example, changing cultures, if you're suddenly living, so I mean, you're from the US, but now you're living in Germany. And so, I mean, there's so many different interesting, complex layers about identity and connecting with yourself. And I mean, this is maybe kind of why when you now take a look at what we're trying to do with the Togetherness Hub, it's just a continuation of my own curiosity to understand myself and to understand others, and answer questions like, how do we establish trust? How do we define if someone is an acquaintance or if someone is a friend of ours? How do we define if a romantic relationship gives us pleasure and happiness? Is it actually this partner of ours, or is it originating from within? And so in the end, it's, you probably could also call it my quest, my journey towards more wisdom, and the hope to find more answers. But so I think this is also when we talk about lifelong learning, I think that's probably the best way of approaching new projects, to never consider yourself as, now I'm an expert, because there's always someone who has a different perspective or different layer, different layer to this whole conversation. And I mean, just take a look at academia, like two researchers having a dispute on a academic level using language which excludes 99% of society, and they still disagree about what is true and what is maybe just a matter of perspective.
Yeah. I I really want to sort of tout hold on, Rachel's saying something. Let's just include her a little bit. Very interesting. Still curious about what I'm here to do. Yeah. I feel like there's, so, part of what you'd said about culture is also really interesting. And I'm really keen to learn more about how these conversations at the Togetherness Hub, because you really created a platform where international communities come together and share ideas for tackling loneliness. And in our new Sidewalk Talk listener training, we've embedded a bunch, because we realize that some of the empathy and listening trainings that are offered are usually very culturally specific. And so you teach these, but you forget to teach people that all of that's happening in a cultural context. And so now we actually teach cultural nuance as part of our listener training, because there's so much difference in terms of how much is too much sharing versus not enough sharing versus emotional sharing versus intellectual sharing. And so I'm just really excited to watch how the conversations happen on the Togetherness Hub with that in mind, right? I'm curious how you're going to bridge that, because I can imagine, I even do this with couples that I work with, right? A lot of times, I'm going to make a gender stereotype here, but a man will come in and he has learned to embody his feelings, but maybe not put words to his feelings. Whereas a woman might be less embodied in her feelings, but really good at talking about her feelings. And so I say to them, my job is to become a translator and help you learn. You speak Chinese and you speak Greek in how you're communicating emotionally. And we're just going to help you learn each other's language. How are you going to bridge that gap? That'll be really interesting.
I mean, what you're describing is, of course, a task which I don't feel capable of taking up myself. How we envision the Togetherness Hub to further come to existence. So we're creating a digital infrastructure, but we don't want to create it for the community. I mean, currently we don't have a real community yet. So what we try to build is to co-create, to collaborate on creating something, and asking the people that in the process, do you want to be part of the community? Do you identify with this entity which we at one point might call a community? Why is it that you identify with this community? Conversations we're having quite a lot right at the moment are about language itself, language barriers. So we started off this project. So I speak German, I speak kind of fluently English. I speak maybe a tiny bit of Russian and maybe a petit peu en français. So I don't even, so I have my school French. Yeah, so I don't even speak French properly. And so, of course, by nature, when you take a look at South America, stakeholders from South America, when you take a look at the African continent, so we now have our conversation with someone from Nigeria, from Zimbabwe, but all those conversations are still happening in English. And so what we have in mind right at the moment, that we will definitely work quite a lot with gatekeepers, so people who can bridge between cultures, who can help us understand cultural specific needs and can also transport some of the ideas we might build in this kind of usually quite English shaped environment into the regional language. And so that we kind of create this global layer where we think global, but in the end that it still comes down to act locally. Because also when you think about loneliness and connection building and friendships, and I mean, of course you can befriend someone from around the world, but so most communities, most relationships are still heavily localized. And so we believe we want to share knowledge internationally, but in the end, we want to work with plenty of national and regional stakeholders to amplify the ideas, the findings, and pass them into like a little bit like a tree, like the different branches into their communities again, get feedback from their communities. It's being translated maybe back to English, being brought together in this international sphere. And so it's kind of It's a circle. It's coming back. It's being circled down again into the communities. Feedback is originating from the communities again. And in the end, it's probably going to be an ongoing journey. We will never kind of come to an end. We can try to really create kinder communities, to create more resilient communities, to empower the individual to kind of be self-reflected and understanding their own needs and preferences, and playing it forward and seeking the relationships and the individuals they need to experience a fulfilling life. Well, I mean, I don't expect and that I mean, we can't, we are advocates, but I would never kind of take the kind of liberty to say, okay, now suddenly we are representing kind of the global space. We are inviting into a global conversation, but we will never kind of probably reach the point where we take the liberty to say, and now we represent the global dialogue.
So this is really egalitarian leadership. This is about a collaboration and co-creation that I think the world so sorely needs if we're going to really solve this together efficiently. I know we're near the end of time, so I wanted to just ask you to toot the big event on Wednesday. So tell everyone what's happening on Wednesday, and is everybody included? Can everybody register and join, or do they need to be a researcher?
Now everyone can join. So we try to keep the conversation as inclusive as possible. So in the end, we try to facilitate a conversation mostly kind of one level above the individual. So that it still kind of can include experts, but still we try mostly bring organizations and companies and researchers together to have a dialogue about social health, about loneliness and loneliness interventions, about the future of human and social connection. And right at the moment, we see so many individual approaches by organizations, how they try to help the chronically lonely individuals within their communities. And we want to help them to learn from each other. And so right at the moment, it doesn't matter if you are a student interested in the subject matter and you want to be part of a conversation. If you are an experienced researcher with 30 years of experience, if you represent an organization either as a volunteer or as an executive director, if you feel like you're interested in this conversation, please join us, because only with your feedback we can further grow and nourish this community. This is one thing. And what to expect. So we by now have attendees registered from 15 countries, as I think I said earlier. And we're really trying to showcase, on one hand, we're presenting the platform, the digital platform, for the very first time. And kind of it's an extended invitation to then apply, or not apply is the wrong word, just give reason why someone wants to be part of the community and to kind of be part of this global conversation. And so we have 5 guest speakers from 4 different countries during the event, and also a small music act. And so we're trying to create a space where the people can also have a quick round with other people from all around the world, sharing some ideas and experiences, how they are dealing, or how they are kind of dealing with the subject matter of loneliness within their professional space.
Wonderful. So excited. So I wanted to just wrap this up, and we're going to repost this, share this conversation on the podcast as well. And we have this ritual that I shared with you ahead of time. There's a very succinct ritual that we have for how we complete conversations here at Sidewalk Talk, which is I get out of the way and introduce you to all the listeners around the world that sit on sidewalks, many who are listening online these days. Any words of wisdom or a wish, whichever you choose, Jannis.
Do what you love, not necessarily what you want. That would be my words of wisdom, because it's based on, I believe, heavily on self-reflection. So if you dig deep and trying to understand who you are, it's always an attempt, and truly trying to understand what you love and what makes you happy. That's a way better way of going through life than just doing what you seem to want at the surface, kind of being imposed by expectations, and kind of the momentarily kind of urge and for something.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here with us. And for everybody that has watched live, thanks for stopping by. And for those of you that are going to watch the recording, please be sure to head over to the togetherness.hub.com to register for Wednesday's live launch party and follow their work and participate and help out. They're always looking for more helpers. All
Thank you
right.
so much for having me.
Thanks, Jannis.
Thanks. Bye.